You're listening to the Dueling Pistols podcast, where we read and discuss the stories of our past and explore some of the most wild adventures from modern history.
No, bro. George Washington said, stay strapped or get clapped, and I'm all about that. I ain't,
Floyd had split his surveying party into 3 groups.
Bro, you never split up. Never split up. You seen Scooby-Doo? Nothing good happens when the group splits.
As they tried to drag the canoe to the shore, Fanny Calloway beat him over the head with the paddle until it broke.
Good job, Fanny.
When the man in front goes down, pick up his rifle and shoot.
I hate this guy.
Yeah?
I hate this guy. I want him dead. I want him to die, and die a somewhat miserable death.
We ain't like the British. We dissed everything, including the accent.
One of the Shawnees killed that day was the son of the man who would become Boone's captor and adoptive father.
Wow. Bro, this is like a freaking soap opera. That is ridiculous. Does he have an evil twin that's going to pop out sometime too?
Triggered by Black Flag. All right, folks, welcome back. We are back to the book. This is episode 2. And I feel like Brent, you and I need to go over set a little more context, historical context for this discussion, just to put things in perspective for people that are listening and for you, since you haven't read this. So Brent's my guinea pig here on the show, where everything is brand new.
I'm coming into it all blind.
So, okay, let's set the stage here. So for those that are listening, thank you for joining us. The podcast today is from the book called Boone, a biography by Robert Morgan. And we discussed last episode, we kind of got into the figure Daniel Boone. Historically, there's been many, many books written about him. Scholars all over the world have discussed Daniel Boone. There's a lot of controversy around Daniel Boone, and he's just an interesting character. So we're gonna learn about him together through the book. Now, one of the things that we touched on was early America. I want to set the stage a little more to put dates and times and stuff in perspective. So, Brent, here's a little history quiz for you, and he's going to bomb miserably. He's going to bomb.
Are dates involved? Because that's dumb.
Yeah, dates are involved. Dumb. So, Brent, when did Columbus, quote unquote, discover America?
Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1402. Something like that.
Oh, you're only off by 100 years. 1492.
1492. Hey, I was in the century, bro.
Okay. So, next, we have in the story the grandfather of Daniel Boone named George III. Okay. He was born in 1666. So about 70 years after the discovery of America, you have Daniel Boone's grandpa born. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So shortly after that, you have Boone's father. Boone's father's name is Squire Boone. He's born in 1696. America has been discovered for about 200 years when Squire Boone is born. From there, we have Squire Boone moving to the United States in 1713. Okay, there's some things that caused them to move, and we're going to get into that a little bit. So in the 1650s, roughly, you have a lot of religious changes and things happening in England, in Europe in general. And one of those things was a man by the name of George Fox founding the Society of Friends, which was sort of the precursor, I guess, I might be butchering this, but in general, to the Quakers. Okay. Mm-hmm. So George Fox comes out of what may be the Church of England. I don't recall exactly, but out of that, there's disagreements within the orthodoxy of the current church, the dogma that's there, the faith. And so he's like, yeah, I'm going to do it differently. And he has his own beliefs, and he kind of is like, no, I think this is a better way. And he feels inspired. And so he starts teaching, and he gets persecuted a lot, thrown in jail a lot. George Fox does, but he brings about the Quaker faith. Okay. And it says, if you want to learn more about that, dig in. But the point is, I'm just trying to set dates. So the 1650s, you have the Society of Friends, and George Fox was born in 1624. So Boone's grandpa and George Fox, same kind of close generations, right? And George III became a Quaker in later due to the influence of George Fox. Okay. Squire Boone is born, and then they moved to the United States in 1713. And George Fox, I'm just going to read a little bit here, just so people can know a little bit about the man. So Walt Whitman, he wrote as he was raised by Quakers. And the reason this is relevant to the story is that basically Daniel Boone is a Quaker, what they call, as we mentioned last week, a fighting Quaker. And so he lived by a lot of the religious principles and the ideas taught by Quakers: self-reliance, independence, being very, I guess, Christ-centered in many ways, industrious, hardworking, all those sorts of things, tell the truth, very moral foundation. So it says Walt Whitman, raised by parents inspired by Quaker principles, later wrote about George Fox. George Fox stands for something too, a thought, the thought that wakes in silent hours, perhaps the deepest, most eternal thought latent in the human soul. This is the thought of God, merged in the thoughts of moral right in the immortality of identity. Great is this thought, I, greater than all else. And talking about the Society of Friends, the Religious Society of Friends is a movement within Christianity that began in 1650s in England. Early Friends, such as George Fox, he's the one standing on a chair and preaching in a crowded tavern in this picture. You can see this picture here. Could throw it up later.
Geez.
Okay, because the picture says a lot.
Yeah.
Right? It says he's preaching in a crowded tavern in this picture, sought to revive, quote unquote, primitive Christianity by going back to the roots of Jesus' teachings around nonviolence, simple living, God's concern for the marginalized, the immediate and equal access to God's Spirit. They became known as Quakers because people used to mock them for quaking when they were overcome with spiritual energy. Embracing the insult and making it their own, they became one of the most distinctive religious movements in modern Western culture. So, Quakers. So out of that comes Squire Boone moving. George Fox, I think, was working to have Society of Friends colonies in like France. I don't remember all the locations, but basically there were groups of faithful members of Society of Friends all over the place. And one of the places they went was to Pennsylvania, especially because he spent a lot of time in jail, George Fox, because of the persecution because he was, a heretic a little bit. So in America, they could worship as they wanted. They came here. Squire Boone he marries Sarah Morgan in 1720. And then Daniel Boone was born 14 years later in 1734. Okay. All the pieces coming together, making sense? Okay, so when do you think George Washington was born? Daniel Boone was born 1734. First of all, before we answer that question, Brent, when was the Revolutionary War, when America gained its independence from England?
I'm going to say sometime 1700s.
Well, yeah,
Early
but
1700s.
Come on, Brent, you could dig deeper than that.
I have no idea, bro.
There's been a rewrite of history that is full of bullshit, which is the 1619 Project. Has slim elements of reality and truth in it, and then the rest is mostly garbage. So you'll see in pushback of 1619, you see the 1776.
There we go.
1776 essentially is when America was founded. So the Revolutionary War began in 1775. America declared its independence in 1776, said, hey, screw you. We're doing our own thing, England, and you're not the boss of us anymore. That war carried on until 1783.
It's a bit of a long war.
So 1775 to 1783, it was 8 years. Takes a long time to get things done back then.
A lot of traveling.
A lot of traveling, a lot of horseback.
You're really dictated by the seasons. I mean, you can only fight for so many months out of the year.
So 1776 is America's independence from England. And one of the things that brought that about, right, was all the colonies, England had been colonizing different parts of the world, and they were all subject to the crown, though. They were supposed to pay their taxes. They were supposed to do things and still obey the king. They were just colonies away from England. And a lot of family members, the people that settled here in the United States, they weren't exactly against England. They just wanted more freedom. But they resented the fact that they were being taxed and bossed around and told what to do over time, because England had they gave very little support. They were basically on their own. But then the country still wanted all their money and all their gains and all that kind of stuff after they'd sacrificed. So you started to have this problem where people felt more and more independent in the United States, and in England they were like, you guys are rebels and you're treasonous against the nation that you belong to, and so hence there was the war. And many of the people who came to the United States early on, what was some of their, I mean, there was a lot of reasons, right? There's a cocktail of reasons.
Religious freedom.
But religious freedom was that near the top, I think.
Mm-hmm.
As you read about it in historical context, you find out that many people just wanted the right to worship how they wanted. They also couldn't get ahead in England the same way that they could here. Like, you're destined for a pretty poor life if you didn't inherit a lot of wealth or have a family name or be a gentleman. You know, how are you going to, hence the American dream, right? You come here and somebody who had nothing could become, well, the president of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, George Washington. So, Brent, we know that Daniel Boone was born in 1734, because I told you that earlier.
Sure.
1734. He died in 1820 when he was 86 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So, spoiler alert, as we go through the book, Daniel Boone dies at a ripe old age. So, the whole time you're reading the book, if you know about Daniel's history, you know Daniel Boone does not die. You know, like in any of these harrowing tales, you're kind of like, oh.
It kind of robs some of the suspense.
But also,
you know?
it's like, it's cool because you're like, how's he going to get out of this one? Because you know he is.
Exactly.
Not,
which is every 80s action movie.
but many don't. Like, many of them suffer. You can't grow up in that time frame. I mean, if you made it past 14, you were pretty lucky.
Yeah.
And then if you made it into your 20s, you're pretty, because usually you got murdered by somebody or you got sick and died, you know. So anyway, back to setting context. George Washington was born in what date? So Daniel Boone was 1734.
I'm going to say they're the same age.
Dang close. Hold
on. Are they within a decade of each other?
Closer.
A year?
Which one's older?
I'm going to say George Washington's older.
Yeah, George Washington is ahead of Daniel Boone by 2 years.
Okay.
So George Washington was born in 1732, and Daniel Boone was born 2 years later in 1734.
Okay.
So this puts things in perspective, right? So you know that you're talking for historical perspective,
they've only known about
uses.
America for about 200 years or so.
Yeah, not even that. About right.
Yeah.
And what you're seeing right now is just early colonial people moving into the United States. There are no real wars with the Indians.
Yeah, the Indian wars haven't started
They're
yet.
all getting along pretty well. You have the French and the Spanish here.
And the French, they like to start that.
And the French, you sounded more Mexican.
I know, I petered off there. I don't know what happened.
So you have the French and you have the Spanish here and the English, and they're all kind of fighting for grabbing bits and pieces of the land. Okay. But yeah, George Washington born in 1732, Daniel Boone born 2 years later in 1734. They're basically the same generation. So now you can picture in your mind, okay, well, we know George Washington helped lead the army. He was the one that at Valley Forge, he pulled off they beat the English. It didn't seem possible. And if you think back to America gaining its independence, so Daniel Boone was alive through the whole thing. He was there, right there, same age as George Washington, the same.
That's why they call him Colonel Boone sometimes, because he was in the army.
Yeah. And what's interesting too is if you think of George Washington as president, Daniel Boone is out in the woods as a woodsman.
Exactly. So for me, what this is painting the picture is not so much for Daniel Boone, really, because for Daniel Boone, all I know is he's out in the woods. Like Daniel Boone is wilderness.
Right.
And if he's there with George Washington, that means everything George Washington is doing is in the wilderness. He kind of makes George Washington look a little more badass to me because there's less roads,
I just
less
think
towns.
George Washington is badass.
Well,
period. And people who haven't studied his life, they need to take some time.
Mm-hmm.
That man is the And so, but you have a generation, we're talking of remarkable men, Benjamin Franklin. These are the people who founded the nation, who established the independence from England. And what's fascinating is the Declaration of Independence, and then later the Constitution of the United States, the freedoms, the things that were written. It was like the ideal. This is how we want to be, not how we are. This is the way we want to live. All men are created equal. That was a foreign idea. No, not all men are created equal. Some men are better than other men. That was the assumption. That was the foundation on which everything in England was built.
Classism.
And coming here, it's like, no. Every single person is inherently valuable and worthy just because they live. just because they're alive, because they're a human being, because the divine potential as a son of God or a daughter of God. You have the ability to become something great. You are inherently worth protecting and having alive, and having God-given rights to freedom, to self-defense, to carrying a weapon, to freedom of speech, and so on, to practice your faith how you deem reasonable. You have John Locke, and you have the theory of liberty and what that means, and the government, small government not involved in your life. All these new revolutionary ideas came from what these men brought to the table, and these theories of a new world that could be different than the one that they're leaving behind, which was freedom oriented, juxtaposed against the institution of slavery, which very few actually had slaves, as you'll read about in history. And as you learn about, like, very few could afford to have one if they wanted to. Most of the people lived lives that were nowhere near the ability to do that. And inevitably, the goal of the founding fathers, the ideal world that they wanted to bring forth, that document in the Constitution, it was a what would you say? It was a condemnation in a way. It was it was the continual reminder that these people are not living up to the ideal that they set for themselves. When you say all men are created equal, but then you have slaves, wait a minute, you're not living up to the ideal that you set for yourself, which inevitably led to a civil war, which inevitably led to, 100,000 men dying, in sometimes 30,000 men a day with muskets.
That's a lot of killing.
It's an unbelievable, and there's this march toward becoming more and more like the ideal that these men brought with them, and what they founded in the documents of our nation, the founding documents of our nation. America has continued. This is why the 1619 bullshit bothers me. America has continued to evolve into that place, that bastion of freedom, accepting all people, all races, male, female alike, granting everyone equal rights. It didn't happen overnight. It was a process. And to look at people that were born at this time frame and to judge them, it pisses me off. You're standing on the shoulder of giants, is what you are, from your comfortable place, having the education and the knowledge that you have today, and not living hand to mouth day to day, not striving and struggling through the era that they went through, and then judging them for it when all they were trying to do was live from one day to the next, like carving out an existence. Humans were harder back then, just tougher. And so it bothers me when modern people judge people from the past without placing themselves in the past with them. You can't judge people back then for what we know now.
I thoroughly enjoy people more who have that sense, that debt of gratitude in general to their ancestors, than those that don't.
Oh, absolutely.
Like those, you just get that. It's easy.
So here we are, back to George Washington, Daniel Boone, born about the same time, the Revolutionary War. So when Boone was basically 41 years old when the Revolutionary War started.
What was the average life back then?
Not very long. I mean, Boone lived to be 86.
Which seems insane.
But
that's
Washington,
old now.
Washington was old too. They had tough constitutions. They actually, if they didn't get killed by somebody, they lived a long, tough life. Same with Native people too. What's interesting too is when you read about, for example, Jeremiah Johnson, liver-eating Johnson. He was born in, wait for it, 100 years after Boone.
Okay.
1824, he was born. So he's a baby when Boone dies. In fact, I think, Boone was, Boone had been dead for 10 years or so when, 4 years when Jeremiah Johnson is born. And then when you read about Jeremiah Johnson's life, liver-eating Johnson, you're like, all the things that he goes through, Boone did stuff 100 years before that. Like, this is a long time span. And I think back in the day, I used to kind of blend them together all as sort of the same period. But no, a lot of history happens between these
That's
events,
generations.
these people.
That's like, you could have like 3 generations in that time period.
So Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, he was the 16th president of the United States. George Washington, first president of the United States. George Washington, Daniel Boone, same age. Abraham Lincoln, Civil War, right? Civil War brings about the Emancipation Proclamation and the freedom of blacks from being slaves, right? How long had passed? When was Lincoln born, Brent?
Did George Washington and Abraham Lincoln even know each other?
No.
I'm just trying to do simple math in my head.
When was the Civil War?
I have no idea.
1860s.
1860s.
So if he was the president during the Civil War, do some quick math. How old do you think? When do you think he was born?
Well, when would he become president? In his, I guess, 30s or 40s. So early 1800s.
1809 is when Abraham Lincoln was born. And Abraham Lincoln was 11 years old when Daniel Boone died.
Okay.
Now, remember, the Boones and the Lincolns and Washington, they did things together. The Lincolns were close family to the Boone family, and they intermarried. We talked about it last week. I forget who married who.
Yeah.
I think it was Boone's son married Abraham Lincoln's like aunt or something. I don't remember. The point is, these early people were, these great people were all sort of being forged in the wilderness on the frontier. And they were all coming together with strong convictions and faith. You got to think about the stock of the people who came to this country, their convictions, the sort of character that they had, the sort of drive that they had, which then they instilled in their children and so forth as they established, new communities in the new world, right? Opposed to like a penal colony like in Australia where they just sent all the convicted criminals.
Good luck.
So they're tough too in a different way, and so I think it's interesting just to see you didn't come here unless you were and survive the journey and then carve out a life if you weren't special because the world took you out.
You just required a certain type of person. Like you had to have like a certain enough smarts. You had to have a certain amount of fortitude, willpower, strength, conviction. So just crossing the pond and getting here, you had to be of a certain caliber.
Yep. So does that help you with a little context for this time frame and kind of what we're dealing with? Okay. I'm going to get back into the book. We're going to resume where we left off. We're going to get a little bit into Daniel as a child. That's where we left off. Last week or last episode, we talked about how Boone just disappeared for days because he was on a bear trail. And then he came back and he's like, oh, and his family's like, where the hell are you? His mother was looking for him. Rebecca, like, where'd you go? And then he found her or she found him.
Yeah, because he was chasing the bear.
Yeah, he's like, I couldn't leave, So
the Last of the Mohicans took place in 1757.
Yes.
So that puts it in more perspective for me.
Well, recall Last of the Mohicans, written by James Fenimore Cooper, is a fictional novel set in that time frame.
Yeah, the French Indian
Wars. Yeah, I mean, you had the French and Indian Wars at the time, which was a precursor to the Revolutionary War later. Because remember, during that war, it was between the French and the English. Well, the colonial people who were here, the settlers were like, dude, we got fields to hoe and, we got to watch our backs. The Indians are mad at us, all this kind of stuff. And then the King of England was coming over and saying, all you people who live here, you're going to enlist in this war. And if you don't, we'll put you all to death. Well, the settlers got pissed, especially as their homes got raided and their farms, and it caused all these problems. And and they were like, this is England's war, not our war. Like, we get along with the French and the French are getting along with us. And it eventually culminated in, 1757 being those wars. Later, 1775, 76 is when, you're talking 20 something years later, it became the settlers against England. Boston Tea Party throws the tea over, and you have now this, we're not paying you taxes anymore. And then England comes over and says, okay, we're going to come over there and stomp on your throats. And then they ran into a whole nation of dedicated people who were like, sorry, this is our country now. So, America. All right, let's do this. Okay, so because of the family's strict Quaker principles, the Boone children were not allowed to attend parties or dances. But Daniel and Henry heard of a frolic to be held in a distant town, and giving each other courage. So Daniel and Henry, they're brothers, I believe. Giving each other courage or daring themselves, they decided to borrow Squire Boone's horse in the night and ride away to the dance.
Okay, I did a lot of dumb things growing up, for sure. I could think of a lot of shenanigans.
It's like they snuck out and stole their parents' car.
Yeah, but also, like, remember the rifle incident from the day before? I'm like,
Yes.
these kids, like, I did a lot of things that were like, I put myself in danger plenty of times, but I didn't put other people in danger.
Well, they sneak out because they're going to go to a frolic, a party or a dance that they're not allowed to because their religious parents are against it.
So this is Footloose.
So they're stealing their dad's horse in the night and they ride away to the dance. After an evening of celebration, perhaps after sampling some of the local hard cider, they decided to jump the horse, carrying both of them over one of Squire's cows sleeping in the pasture. Did you catch that? They to jump the horse with both of them on it over one of the sleeping cows in the pasture. Yeah, why not? You know, you've been in a car. Remember that road behind Larry's Sports Center that if you gunned it, the Suburban would go like 15 feet into the air?
The bumpy road?
The bumpy road.
Yeah.
I wrecked more than one car on that road.
A lot of people wrecked cars on that road.
That was dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, you steal the car and then you're a teenager and you're like, well, let's see what it can do. And then you do something
Nothing good.
Stupid.
Nothing good is the answer to that question.
So the cow awakened and started to rise, Brent, rear first, just as the horse began its leap. Daniel and Henry slammed to the ground, shaken but unhurt, but the horse broke its neck and died. Ooh. The boys returned the bridle and saddle to the barn and crept back into the house as if nothing had happened. Squire never solved the mystery of how a healthy horse could let itself out of the barn and break its neck in an open pasture.
Never, huh? He had no suspicions.
Oh.
Okay, let's be real.
Yeah.
They knew. 100% they knew someone.
I mean, if they, kids can pull it off sometimes. So
I have a hard time seeing little Quaker Puritan boy being like, no, I didn't kill the horse. We talk. I get away with murder all the time.
It says one of the pranks credited to Boone and Henry Miller was, so Henry Miller was a friend. Boone and Henry Miller was taking apart piece by piece the wagons of neighbors who had scolded them and placing the wagon wheels on the ridgepoles of the owners' barns. But these may have been Halloween tricks more than acts of revenge.
So they took apart like their teacher's car and reassembled it in a building somewhere?
On the top of the barn.
Okay, gotcha.
Daniel began to acquire a reputation for prowess, cunning, and willpower.
And a bit of a shithead is what it sounds like.
From an early age, he could walk miles without getting tired and swim any river or pond. He could outrun other boys, and he always seemed to win fights and wrestling matches. With bow and arrow, he always seemed to win shooting matches, and with a rifle, he was without peer. If he and his friends played Hunt the Indian, he always found the Indian. If it was his turn to be the Indian, he disappeared and could not be found. It's basically hide and seek, it seemed like, but Hunt the Indian was a little more
aggressive.
I think more realistic and relatable. Once he and Henry and other boys were carrying their rifles in the woods and surprised a panther sunning on the riverbank. It screamed and started to charge. The other boys ran, but Daniel stood his ground, leveling his sights at the bounding cat. Just as the creature was about to leap at him, he fired and the cat fell dead at his feet. The second generation of the immigrants often had less education than the first. Okay, you got to remember, like Squire Boone grew up in England. It's like growing up in the city, like kind of how we grew up. And then they get that background. They go to college. They get higher educations. They're very well educated. It's a very civilized nation. Then they up and move to the wilderness. There's no schools. There's no college. There's no education. And you pretty much got to milk the cows and take care of stuff and do work all day long to get by. So it's going to take some time before there's an actual like sort of formalized education system in the frontier, right? So you got that little house on the prairie frontier type school for, the kids go to for like an hour or two. And then there's always that debate, Mary can't go to school because she needs to milk the cows and we're falling behind them. And they all get like no education.
Yeah.
That. They took the powder horn and left the inkhorn at home, the biographer W.H. Bogart later wrote. From infancy, Daniel had been exposed to daily readings from the Bible, and it is likely its words made a lasting impression on him in the mighty solitudes of his after years. But the fact is, all other Boone sons received a respectable education. As far as we know, only Daniel avoided school and rules of grammar and spelling. It would seem his parents early on recognized his skills as a hunter and woodsman, who provided the family with venison and turkey and squirrels and rabbits, as well as hides and furs. It was practical to let him do what he did better than anyone else. Later in his life, in a moment of great danger, Boone would write sentences such as, "Your company is desired greatly, for the people are very uneasy, but are willing to stay and venture their lives with you. And now is the time to frustrate the Indians' intentions and keep the country whilst we are in it." This letter, written to Richard Henderson on April 1st, 1775, remember the beginning of the Revolutionary War time, as Boone and his men were hacking out Boone's the trail, into the through the frontier.
His axemen.
They were hacking it out after being attacked by Indians. It shows he had some command of language as well as a flair for making up words and spelling.
Yeah, I was going to say they need to what the Indians?
Flusterate.
It's
like frustrate and fluster.
Yeah, flusterate.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah, it works. I mean, like, it gets the point across.
I want to use that word from now on. Don't frustrate me, Brent. Yeah. It says, we don't know, of course, how much help he had with the letter from his son-in-law, Will Hayes. Just a caveat there. But he does write a lot, and as we learn throughout the book, and he's charismatic in his own frontier way. So young Daniel's greatest teachers were the woods themselves and the Indians he watched and questioned and imitated. We talk often of the impact of the white culture on the Native Americans, but the influence of the Indian culture on the white was just as significant. Not only did the settlers and hunters learn much about hunting and trapping and survival from the Indians, they also learned the use of herbs and roots and berries, medicines, the lay of the land, and courses of rivers to the west. The Boone family, like William Penn himself, had always been known to be friendly to the Indians. Boone's grandfather, George III, had organized a rescue of 2 Indian girls who had been kidnapped. Indians passing through the neighborhood were often invited to eat and drink and stay the night at the Boone home. In 1736, a chief called Sasunan, king of the Schuylkill Delawares, stayed at the Boone homestead with a party of 25.
Jeez.
Relations between Indians and whites in Pennsylvania were more peaceful than in the other colonies. In the woods along the Schuylkill, above Philadelphia, white hunters who lived like Indians were seen frequently along the trails and beside the streams. Indians of many different tribes mingled in the hills and villages north of Ole, Tuscaroras, and Tuteles. People from Philadelphia are going, that's not how you say that. Canois, Nanticokes, Shawnees, and Susquehannocks. And
another name of the river is Susquehanna.
Yeah, that one. One nearby Indian village called Manangistown was later renamed Reading. Besides the minor outbreak of fighting in 1728, there were no Indian raids on the southeastern Pennsylvania frontier in the 18th century. It was a time when the Indians were learning from the Europeans to use firearms, wear woven cloth, build log cabins, use metal tools, and drink whiskey. And from the natives, the white hunters learned the ways of the American woods, the best techniques for hunting deer and bear and trapping beavers, mink, and otter. From the Indians, the hunters learned to prepare bear bacon and jerk from venison. They learned to cure deer hides and buffalo hides and bear skins, and they learned the beauty and the value of furs, the glistening pelts of beavers that populated almost every stream in the forest, the pelts of mink and otter, fox and muskrat, raccoon and pine marten were also useful and beautiful, warm and silky to the touch. Most luxuriant of all was the otter. Its fur deep and dark and sparkling, soft as a whisper to the fingertips, shining with mystery. In the old world, fur was reserved for royalty. In the North American forests, fur was there for anyone with the skill to take it.
Otters are cool. I love otters. Did you know otters have pouches?
No.
So they have, so they have like a little pouch right here around their chest where they can.
Sea otters or river otters?
I believe it's sea otters, the bigger ones, the ones that are like
sea otters. They're giant.
They're giant. Yeah,
they scare me a little bit.
So they have these pockets,
especially when you see them like dive off the coast of Alaska and come up out of the water, and you're like, that thing's huge,
dude.
And then it's like it pulls up like a clam.
Yeah,
and then it takes like a rock and bashes it and rips the animal out of it. And
those rocks, they keep those rocks
in their pouch.
I'm not kidding you. Yes, the otters have a favorite rock that's called, guess, an otter rock. I kid you not. So otters have these little rocks to keep in these pouches because it's like if you find a good rock, bro, you
got to keep it. Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Genius.
They use tools. They're
They use
fascinating.
tools, right?
And their fur, man. What's interesting is, so you mentioned earlier Last of the Mohicans, right?
Mhm.
I watched that in the theater when it first came out. I was in high school, and I remember sitting there in the theater and watching this thing, and then it stuck with me for, well, it's like one of my favorite films of all time.
All times. One of the best soundtracks.
Yeah. I mean, but one of the things that's really interesting about it when you really watch it, right, is how all these peoples intermingled. Like the Indians were wearing cloth, but also leather and skins, and vice versa.
Beads and
The
feathers.
colonials were, the settlers
Moccasins.
were wearing, they were taking bits and pieces from each other to make things work. And you have a clash of cultures, right? Because the Duncan comes here. He's in love with the girl. The girl comes. She's the son of a general, colonel. You know, that one scene where they're near the burial ground, right? And, or let's take the one where they don't bury their friends. They come across this burned out farm. Earlier in the show, you saw that they were friends. They come along, they find out that the Indians massacred the family there. And then as they just leave and they don't bury anybody, the girl from England is indignant and is like, have you people no sympathy? Are you godless and stuff? And he's like, they were our friends, lady. And we love these people, basically, and the bodies stay where they are. And she's just like baffled by it. And he's pissed, right? And you have this clash where these people don't understand each other. Their ways are different. And later he's describing why they didn't bury those people that were their friends, you know, as the Indians are approaching them in the night, but then they're camped near a burial ground, which makes the Indians decide to like back off out of suspicion. And of course, all of this is Hollywood, but you get it. Like there is what you see unfolding are these cultures colliding. We're all human beings, but there's so much that each doesn't know about the other or understand the other. But once they spend enough time together, they start to realize that they're all human beings. They're all human, and they all feel and they all bleed the same, and they're more similar than dissimilar. And what's so cool is you see just in the clothes they wear remember when the settlers are there and they're trying to drum up support to go help England fight the French, and you have some settlers saying we got to help the crown and all this, and you have some of the settlers like
the crown,
like that's like, yeah, screw that, we aren't going to fight for the crown, they don't do jack for us. And you see in the background a bunch of native Indians playing like some kind of stickball.
Yeah, it looks like a cross
with the settlers, and they're beating the hell out of each other, and they're playing this
and
game.
they're playing
and
rough.
You got whites and Indians
and they're
all
throwing
together,
each other around.
And there is a sense of, you know, we tend to think, well, the Indians were over here and the settlers were over here, not realizing how interwoven these cultures actually were at the time. And you'll see as we get through the book how this unfolds, because Daniel Boone is basically like, he's an Indian. I mean, at the end of the day, he's as Indian as an Indian gets, and the Indians love him. The Indians respect him. He's a legend. By the time he's in his 50s, I mean, he has done some things, and the Indians, like, they have utmost respect for him, and they adopt him as a family member. And then you jump to the other side, and he also fits in with the white culture as well, and the I should say the European culture that he comes from. And these two worlds, they're crashing into each other. And it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating to see him love both worlds, but also reconcile himself to the fact that the two are talking past each other. They can't sort out that. They can't seem to figure out. One's just like subsuming the other. And, you know, we all kind of know how that story ends. The dominant culture overtakes the other. And Boone is the very thing he loves and cherishes. You know, I got to move west. I got to move further away. I got to see new country, the pristine wilderness. He's also the guy that sort of, because of what he did, sped the disappearance of it as well. like
Mhm.
spread. He
In his pursuit for solitude, he brought people along behind him.
and what I think many couldn't believe, like when the buffalo become nearly extinct,
Mhm.
those who came on the buffalo first and hunted them as much as they did couldn't fathom the idea when you see millions of those animals that they could, like the supply was endless.
Mhm.
I heard many books written where people had said it just seemed like you couldn't outfish the place. You couldn't out hunt the place. Like the idea of seeing so many people there that they could actually impact the resource just seemed impossible to those virgin eyes. And it wasn't until later that the impact, the gravity of civilization and its impact on the natural world.
Well, hindsight's 2020. It's easy for us to look back and say, well, obviously,
Well,
that would
yeah, and
happen.
it's
But there's no concept.
it's like
really for that.
complaining about third world nations, countries like some parts of Africa, and saying, they ought to do all they can to protect lions. And those people over there literally are having children snatched by lions.
Mm-hmm.
All lions do is cause problems for them. There's no monetary or other value.
Well,
if
Brian,
they could just,
why don't you just let a lion live next door to you?
Right,
Let's get
if
a
there's
pack
a
of
marauding-
lions and let's drop them in Cache
and
Valley
our kids
just
can
hang
walk
out.
to school.
Yeah, they'll be fine.
It's like it's insane because
There's so many other animals for them to eat, Brian, before they ever get to your
well,
kids.
and they're not going to worry about the lion population, let alone the environment, let alone the emissions and so forth.
Mhm.
When they're just hand to mouth every day.
You got mouths to feed, bro. You got other concerns.
I mean, you don't even know if you're going to be here tomorrow. Like worrying about a lot of the things we worry about today are luxuries because of our wealth.
Mhm.
Our wealth enables us to think about things 50 years from now, 100 years from now. When you don't think you're going to make it 5 years, you're not thinking about 100 years from now what it will be like for your kids or your
being able to think
ancestors.
5 years into the future is a luxury that we have that most people just never had. Just 5 years.
Folks don't seem to grasp it, but so it's pretty cool. So it talks about how furs were so important, they're so valuable in England, but here different. So we're going to get into the next section, the hide of the deer, what it was used for, like all the different. I think this is fascinating because, the woodsman part of this gives you a glimpse into what was available and how they leveraged it and what was used for what.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a lost art. We're sitting on some bear furs. I got these things laying around the house
how many
everywhere.
dead animals are we sitting on right now?
There's 4 bears sitting here.
Okay.
I want to get one of those machines, those
Am I
sewing
included
machines.
in that?
I want to get a machine where I can sew. I have so many hides, including like tar. Ryan has a chamois. I never got me one of those. That chamois feels
You need a
crazy.
coat.
I know. I saw a sewing machine where you stitch these things together, and I was looking at it going, oh, we could do that.
Mom's birthday's next month.
I kind of want to build like a bear blanket, but the furs
bro,
are
Mom's
so.
birthday's next
the
month. Let's
furs-
get her a sewing machine.
The furs contrast with each other so much. Like some have super long fur.
Yeah.
And like that one is so different. And then these are like, they stand straight up. They don't curl at all.
Mm-hmm.
Or
This one's
bunch.
kind of wavy and
And that one has like, it's coarser. It's so interesting, but we'll get into that in the next one. That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're enjoying the series. If you like the channel, be sure to like and subscribe. And leave us a comment. We always like that. We'll read the comments, get into those. If you want to engage with us, that's the place to go. Tell us what you think. If we got our facts wrong, anything that which is bound to happen, just leave it in the comments, and we'll update the information. And thanks for tuning in. See you next time. All right, folks. I hope you're enjoying the Dueling Pistols podcast. If you like it, do us a favor and share it with a friend. Help us get this thing to grow a little bit bigger. Tell your dad, your mom, your brother, your sister, your buddy, your uncle.
Go to
your
contacts,
grandpa.
hit select all, send.
Just sell it. Just share it with a friend of yours, somebody, and help us spread the word about the show. Thanks for supporting us. We'll catch you on the next episode.